Hey there, Nostalgia Gogglers. We try not to ask for reviews and recommendations too often on this show, and I think we've done a pretty good job. But you know what? George's birthday just passed, and what I would love to give him for his birthday is a few more of you loyal, let's say, gogglers out there. The best way to do that really is reviews on Apple Podcasts and just recommending the show word of mouth. People trust you as a listener more than they trust a recommendation from me as one of the hosts. So if you can take the time to give us a review on Apple Podcasts, if you can take the time to recommend this show to someone who might enjoy it, and if you really want to go crazy and check out our Patreon, there's links for all that stuff on nostalgiagoggles.audio. It's a real easy thing to do. It helps us out a lot. And it's a real cheap, super cheap way for you to give George a birthday present. So he'd appreciate it. I'd appreciate it. And as always, thank you. Really, thank you so much for listening.
The world is saved. The living room's dark save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
It's going like village good, and like I'm working on like town good, but then I'm really hoping to end the night at like city metropolis good.
So the interesting thing is that I believe that this game starts with town, not village. What you were quoting was actually the D&D taxonomy of town sizes. But
I thought there was going to be a civilization joke in there. Like,
no, that would be
civilization. They definitely start with villages, right?
Oh, yeah. But I mean, to be fair, that would be uncivilized. There it is.
So SimCity, we played the Super Nintendo SimCity, which is not the original SimCity, but I think for most people in our age range, it probably is their original SimCity. There was like a PC one earlier that was on like PC and Mac, and holy smokes, it was, if you think this is unsophisticated, that one was like, press button to city. Congratulations, you have city. Like it was just, it was neat for the time, but like it came out in like 84 or something. Like it's old. It goes way back.
Right. Yeah. No, we did not play that one. We played the one for the Super Nintendo, and hilariously, brief already tangent, but it is semi-related.
Sure.
Is I spoke with a friend of mine, and she basically said, I said, like something. That's what it was. Is that Teddy, my son, when I loaded it up to play a little bit, he wrested the controls from my hand and was like, and started playing failed. And so then he started telling me what to do, which I just did because it was awesome. And he's apparently a very libertarian, like city runner, because he dropped the tax rate to like 2% and no police, just basically lawless land.
Yes.
So
love it.
I said that to a friend of mine, and she said, "Oh, I didn't even know you could set the taxes in The Sims." I was like, "No, it's Sim City. This is pre The Sims. This is different. It's a different thing." And she's like, "Oh, I haven't played either." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
I'm not going to make you name this person because we're not here to shame anyone, but I am curious. Was this person under 30?
This person is under 30. Yes.
Okay. Because that feels like a thing that someone over 30 wouldn't say, like, because those things are super different, right?
Yeah.
like different in like you could never ever confuse those two things if you had been exposed to both of them.
No, you never would. But I mean, I believe, like you said, at a certain age range, like pretty much all there is The Sims, because, and I may be wrong, maybe they are still making SimCity somewhere, but I think pretty much Civilization cornered the market on, civilization world building like that, Well,
I think the real problem is that the company that made SimCity, Maxis, I believe they were acquired by EA, And EA has
Ooh.
this weird thing they do where they're like, what if instead of games that were fun, we just made Skinner boxes that made us all billionaires? And
Yep.
when The Sims came out, they were like, aha. And that was like the end of them investing in the SimCity franchise. I think there has been one or two more in like the last 10 years, but they saw that their moneymaker was not building cities, it was building houses and then letting people make the walls in those houses out of ovens and then
Yep.
burning those houses down with no
Yep.
doors.
Exactly. Yeah, no. But yeah, so nostalgia goggles, what's your specific nostalgia experience for this?
So I don't, it's bad to like pre-apologize, you know, like people who get up and they public speak and they're like, oh hey, you know, I'm not really used to public speaking, so give me a break. Like, you're not supposed to do that, so here I go and do that.
Okay.
I played this game entirely because of and largely with my older brother. This is a game I am positive we owned. It is one of the first Super Nintendo games we ever owned, if not the first Super Nintendo game we ever owned, because I think SimCity was one of the original bundle games where like you could buy a Super Nintendo that had SimCity with it. And I'm pretty sure that that's what we had because the Super Nintendo was for my older brother. And so I played SimCity with him. And I actually texted him when we were going to do this episode. And I was like, hey, do you remember playing SimCity with me as a kid? And he was like, yes. And I was like, can I call you and like get some like funny stories? And he was like, absolutely. And then my life was a catastrophe for like 2 weeks. And I have not spoken to him. So, like, somewhere out there are funny stories of me playing SimCity as a child, and they're just beyond the episode.
Yeah, in a infinite multiverse, there is a version where you did get those stories, and there's a version where we're laughing on them right now. But this is we do not live in that universe.
This is not that. What I can say is that unlike some of the games we've played where I'm like vague, cloudy memories of like, oh, this was my buddy Brian's, or I think this was Alex's, or something like that. Like, I am 1000% positive I played this at home almost exclusively with my older brother.
About the same time you were learning how to do percents?
Right around then, yes. I'm like between 50 and 600% sure it was around that same time.
Perfect. Good to know. Let's see. My nostalgia experience is actually okay. So you know, again, not to pre-apologize, but you know, both of our lives have been a little bit in disarray, right? So you're like, hey, let's play SimCity, and I was like, yes, I have played that. And then a week went by, and I was like, oh no, I am pretty sure that I was thinking of Sim Earth, not Sim City. In fact, I'm certain of it. But maybe, just maybe, I also played Sim City. And I did not. I just played Sim Earth. And actually, I played it on the computer, which is a fun game.
So
But
here's why this is exciting to me. I feel like some people who listen to the show, we love you. We love all of our audience.
go out and scream outside of your house.
Yes, so that we know you're there. I feel like some of those people might think that the we don't do a lot of research ahead of time thing is like a bit. Since this is the second time this has happened, I feel like we're starting to gain some trust on the we don't do research outside of the show.
Nope. We boot up the game. We play it. We use. I mean, to be fair, in my opinion, the main purpose of this is to look at it not through, you know, like, oh, well, what has everybody else said about this game, but instead to say, like, with our knowledge, existing knowledge of video games and on how games are made and on learning tropes and all that sort of stuff, bringing all of that to bear, what can we say about this game? Because it's kind of like Simpsons creator Matt Groening saying that he refused to watch Family Guy because he didn't want to get ideas from them. So I'm kind of okay with not doing pre-research because I don't want to just regurgitate really interesting things that other people have already said. I want us to hopefully find new things. So that way it's unique and interesting.
Yeah. And whether or not we have explicitly said this, it's kind of inherent in the idea of replaying games we played as kids, that if we went out and like learned a ton about it and did a bunch of side research, like that would strongly color our replay experience. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not what we're trying to do. So
No,
as much as I really want to make funny right now, like you're kind of like you're staying on theme is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, is that to me it was interesting to see it play against some of my recollections of Sim Earth, um, because there are definitely. I mean, it's and actually what I did was I booted up Sim Earth for a little bit, and a lot of the idiosyncrasies are like similar, So I definitely wasn't completely taken off guard, but yeah, no, I was when you like play Sim City, I was like, yes, oh man, I played so much Sim Earth. Oh no.
So the one thing you are lucky you don't realize you may have narrowly dodged this bullet is if you had confused Sim Ant or Sim Farm with Sim City, then I would have to heckle you endlessly because those games were just just pale shadows of the great Sim franchise.
Yes, no, none of that. Because what I was picturing in my mind was in Sim Earth, when you play in the technological age, there are huge, you can build cities and stuff, and so that's just what my mind pictured. I was like, oh yeah, it's like like you look at the U.S. and there's a bunch of cities, and yeah, Sim City, yeah, and then my brain said, dude, that's Sim Earth, right? It's like I do now. But the one thing that they do keep consistent, which I really appreciated, was the disaster mechanic. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
That's right. So let's talk about the visuals first, especially because for you they were new and exciting.
Well, they were new.
Yes.
Oh.
I think it's kind of important to describe the visuals in this in a way we have talked about with some other games, with a term that if I didn't make up, I'm certainly going to take all the credit for, which is like tokenizing. And this game, in fact, most of the SimCity games until they crossed, I think, like the SimCity 2000 threshold where they wanted like where you could zoom into the street level and like see individual people walking around. All of the like earlier SimCity games were not even making an attempt to not only look realistic, but even to necessarily look like the thing that they were. Because when you put down like a residential zone, it is literally a red block, well, a red outline of a block with a big red letter R in it. Blue for commercial, yellow for industrial, like, and the buildings look like buildings, but it looks like they're almost like Monopoly buildings. Like it's like a model set of a city. They're not trying to make you feel like you are God looking down on a real city. Like it doesn't even feel like they were hampered by the processing power of the time. It really feels like they said, imagine you're in an office and you are laying out a city. That's how this is going to look. Like you are looking top down on a model of a city.
Yes, and that was actually literally one of my notes, which I'm glad you touched on, is that a lot of games of this era, they were trying to do something of this scope, went to, and we're just going to use that, tokenizing, which I think is very, very, very good. And at first I was like, that's brilliant. And then I thought about it and I was like, that's actually just ripping off what they knew, which is board games, and you said the analogy I was going to bring, Monopoly, right? So like in Monopoly, you start off with, like you own the tile and it's just blue. And then you put 1, 2, 3, 4 houses on it, right? So it's a very clear visual cue as to what, how much money's been poured into this and how much money is going to be poured out of you should you land on it. And then eventually you scoop all that up and you put a red hotel on there. And if you played with an older brother or something like that who was trying to, cheat you, sometimes you'd have multiple hotels on there, which is not how the game's played, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, so basically they do that. So, at first it's like you have cordoned off this area as a residential area. Only residential buildings can be built here. And you just watch it slowly build. And it's really, really great. They do a great job visually because I could get a feel pretty easily just from looking at it, which areas were booming and which areas were, falling apart. And also, too, just in case the visuals got confusing or weird or anything like that, you had the magnifying glass, which I thought was a very, very smart, clever choice, which then takes all of the visuals and brings them down to like their base numbers, Yes.
And
they're like,
it is. And it's nicer than just looking at a list of like, residential zone at grid A1 is doing this well. Residential zone at grid A2 is doing that. Like the fact that you have the same map you always have and you can just move the magnifying glass over it. And it's like, here's how, because does it call them levels? It's like this is like a level 5 residential zone or whatever it is. Like that's a more fun way to interact, and it's completely unambiguous in not just how good that zone is doing in case you're not getting the right vibe from the building, but exactly which zone you're looking at. Like it's unmistakable.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of nice because it literally visually allows you to say like, okay, kind of gives you like you said, that tokenized feel. You can watch as your city like grows and expands, you know. But then if you're like, no, I need to see under the hood. I need to know exactly what's going on with the city so that way I can make a choice. You know, they're like, that's entirely fine. You have that option, you know, and it's very easy. It's a clean visual. So I guess like as far as visuals for the sake of visuals, right? You have the, you know, like the tokenized view, which like looks nice, and it's you know, it kind of gives you an idea of it, right? And then that also services gameplay. But then they said like, what if a visual that solely serviced gameplay? And so then they gave you the microscope, you know, or the
magnifying glass.
Yeah.
There are a couple places where you can tell they were looking down the barrel, and they were like, one day we'll be able to make it so you can zoom in and see people walking down the street of your city, and that's going to be nifty. But what we can do now, when you build a stadium or when you have a zoo, is make individual pixels, literally individual gray pixels, move back and forth in like this very short, very repetitive pattern. And that to me is almost worse, like, because there's nowhere else. I can't think of a single other place besides the zoo or the stadium that literally shows the individual pixels that are supposed to be entire people like moving back and forth. And it just, I don't know, like it just kind of bugged me. I was just like, give it up. Like we know you can't animate people at this scale. It's okay, because everything else, like the little cars and the little trolley car and everything else, like those are, you can tell what they are by looking at them. But if those individual pixels were anywhere but on the football field, I would never guess like, football player.
Yes, obviously. And the ones in the football field, I was like, whatever. The ones on the road, I actually appreciated because it gave you an idea of whether or not the road was actually being used. Because a couple of times...
That's how you know where your traffic is.
Right. So, because a couple of times, like I built roads, I'm like, why aren't people using these roads? And so quick spoiler, I played 2 saves because the first time I did, I was like, this is how a city works. It is not how a city works. And the city I built was so broken that I was like, okay, I've learned. And then like the mayor of Icetown in Parks and Recreation, I abandoned that city and moved on to another one, which actually fared a lot better. But I don't know what happened to that first city. Although, I can't believe we haven't talked about this. What did you name your city?
Yes. So... I have actually, this is in my notes, and we would have re-recorded this entire episode if we got to the end and this didn't come up, because this idea occurred to me the minute I sat down to play SimCity for the first, because actually I got a fair amount of time into this, because, behind the scenes, like we're recording later than we normally do. So like I actually got to put extra time into the game. But I have been waiting for this moment, to tell you that my city sounds like they gave up halfway through naming it. It's City Flabaneva. Except
Fantastic.
There is exactly one too few characters, so it was City Flabanab.
That is fantastic. Very, very well done, sir. Brava. For me, I was going to name it Georgiopolis.
Nowhere near enough characters for that.
Nope. So you know what I sold for? Georgia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Like I did not see that coming.
No, right? Like neither did I. And I was the one who did it because I was like, Georgiopolis. No, that won't work. I need a George themed name. God. Oh, wait. No, I can do this.
Yeah.
So
and were you in Georgia by the time you were?
Yes.
Okay, because it would have been extra embarrassing if you hadn't thought of it being named George in Georgia.
Yeah, being named George in Georgia, being like, what can I possibly name this city?
This riddle is unsolvable.
That was the one I abandoned. The second one that I named, I don't know why. It was mostly like there weren't many trees and stuff, so I named it Arrakis.
Oh, nice. So I subscribe to the many worlds theory of the universe because in reality there were like 8 Flabbernabbas. Because I settled on that name entirely for one specific reason. I don't want to put a lot of thought into the name. And then because I knew that I would get like analysis paralysis and just sit on that typewriter screen for like the entirety of the play session trying to decide on a funny name. So when it occurred to me that I had a funny name that was all about not spending time coming up with a name, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want. But a few of my cities, they what's the right word? They failed me.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah.
You didn't fail them.
No, they failed me and there were a couple cities that I abandoned kind of in the way that like a toddler might knock over like their building blocks, like their little wooden letter blocks, where I was like two little sections into the city, and then I placed like the nuclear power reactor like one line over from where I wanted it, and I was just like, and then I just leveled it, like just burned it to the ground, like hit reset and created a new one as if that one had never existed. So somewhere in all of those alternate realities, there are a bunch of Flabbernabbas that have like 2 residential zones and 1 fire department, but no power and no roads.
So basically what I'm picturing now is that, like you got this burgeoning city, right? Like, so like there are these people building in the residential area, you've got they're starting to like zone out the industrial and the commercial areas. And then, they build this amazing nuclear power plant to please their mayor. And you walk up and you're like, wasn't it supposed to be 5 feet to the right? And they're like, well, and then you just take out your portal gun, like hit it on the ground, and just like leave.
And that fits even better with the name Flabbernabbas, right?
Yeah.
Because like this is what you don't see. These are the cities Lions leaves behind.
Yes, yeah, no, headcanon accepted.
Totally.
But but yeah, no, I definitely thought that the tokens were very good. I thought that that the winter visual that they did, I thought that was kind of a nice little touch. You know?
The fact that in the spring, like the trees have little blossoms on them, and you get at least some sense that time is passing, because just changing the months would be like you could miss it. You could forget that you have the time on super speed. But when everything is white, or all the trees have blossoms, like or all the trees are like the kind of fall autumn color, like you'd really have to not be paying attention to ignore those visuals.
And I want to try to remember when we're going over mechanics to come back to specifically the winter visual, because the way that this game plays, I felt that helped me in a way that I started playing it. But it's really more of a mechanics thing.
Little teaser there.
Epic foreshadowing.
Well, it's foreshadowing.
It's moderate foreshadowing, moderate to low. I thought that if we're also talking about visuals in service of gameplay, I felt that all of the tokens for like stuff you can put down, I thought all of those were very reasonable. Like police department, fire department, like those, yeah. Yeah, I thought that like I could look at those and tell you exactly what they were. The ones across the top, much less so. But to be fair, they were trying to represent like much more non-tangible concepts, like saving.
Yeah. I mean, those are they're menus that to put text there would have taken up way too much screen real estate, or would have looked ridiculous because all of your abbreviations would have been like SVG, and you've been like, what is that? How I save my game? Oh no, that's taxes and saving, right? Like it's
yeah. And that's the thing, is that like it's one of those things where when I clicked on it, like I had no idea what it would be, but then when I saw what it was, I was like, okay, and then I didn't forget it beyond that, So the visual was clear enough once you knew what the visual was, So I couldn't have like looked at it and then been like, this is what this is. But the minute that I clicked on it, I was like, that makes sense,
Yeah, and that's an advantage I'm going to pretend there's a ton of research to support this, but I feel like that's an advantage that iconography has that words don't. Like if you read a sign that says exit, you kind of need to know what the word exit means. And then once you learn, like, oh, this is what it means, you still have to kind of remember in your mind what it was when the next time you see that word. Whereas like in Canada and Europe and I think throughout Asia, like their sign for exit is like a dude going through a door. It's like the little white man, like,
Right.
going through a door. So the first time you see that, you might not immediately be like, oh, is that how I get out of the building? But then once you understand that that's what it means, I feel like that relationship is tighter because you're not trying to remember the definition of a word, you are associating an experience with a symbol. And
Right.
so like when you see the little Dr. Wright face, like once you interact with him the first time, you know forever what that little symbol means. Once you interact with the different views of the map in the map viewer, like you remember what each one of those do, even though they're just little symbols, because like you get to project meaning onto them easier than you can with words, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree completely. Is that not only do they and like you said, they literally translate better. I mean, that's the thing, is that like if you see like a person, running towards an exit, right? And then you see a person running towards like an E or like an X sign or something like that, right? Like you can make small changes to it there where somebody can still look at it and be like, this is probably what that means, and you can kind of suss it out. So in a way that, like symbols that change slightly from like region to region is actually closer to different oh man, I'm completely blanking on the word different accents as opposed to different languages,
Yeah, no, I could pick that up.
Yeah, exactly. Because you could probably pick that up. It's kind of like when you listen to somebody Scottish speaking English, where you're just kind of like, yeah, I'm getting like 66% of what you're saying.
I know how to get out of this building.
Yeah,
So I noticed talking about the tokenizing and things on the building side. I tried to check this as thoroughly as I could. I am fairly confident that bigger universally means better. Like a bigger apartment building always means that is a higher level of development. A bigger shopping mall and office buildings always means a higher level of commercial. A scarier factory belching more toxins into the air always means a higher level of industrial. So like, I don't think there are any instances where a larger token of a building is not the better one that you would be seeking out. What they don't do, and we'll get into this more in visuals, is they don't really tell you that some buildings can only come into existence when multiple zones are side by side. Like the largest residential building, which is very obviously a massive, super cool looking apartment building, cannot exist on a single residential zone and requires two that are perfectly adjacent. Same thing for commercial, and I don't think industrial has an allegory for that, but it probably does. My city, Peter, like kind of plateaued at a certain point.
Yeah, no, I and like you said, like I do want to address this in mechanics, is that's probably very possible. I did not think that, and this is a mechanics thing, but like I didn't think that they did a great job telegraphing like even close to what could possibly be good city layouts.
No,
it's
nope.
100%. Yeah, it's 100% trial and error. So, I set up my city because, like I said, I set it up the first time. I'm like, this makes sense, and then because I set it up as like a group of 9 residentials, a group of 9 industrials, and a group of 9 commercials, all directly attached to the centralized power plant, and I just ran roads to each area. But the commercial areas, each group of areas, near as I could tell, didn't flow into each other. So only the ones that I directly connected to a residential, whatever. So the middle one died. It just didn't do anything, And so I was just kind of like, okay, I guess so. And then once that I got irritated enough with that, I just portal gunned away, But but so I guess the nice thing though, so on the flip side of that token is that I could tell right away that those areas were completely stagnant because the visuals were very clear. I was like, I wasn't sitting there being like, how come I put down 9 industrial areas, but I'm only getting the processing power of 8? I'm like, I know that this is a problem. So I was able to learn from it. So even though the mechanics were occluded, the visuals were very clear.
Yeah, you're and we will definitely go into this more. You get a lot of visual feedback in terms of the current state of things, but it's oh god, what is it? It's the uncertainty principle. Like, because you are able to so accurately measure its current position, you have no idea what its speed or direction is.
Yes, you are completely lost on its momentum.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, overall, I don't want to put too fine of a point on it, but because I have such fond memories of playing this game as a kid, this falls firmly in the like delightful pixel camp for me. So like the second I turned it on, I was just like, aw, Super Nintendo pixel graphics. Like, they're not good, they're not bad, they're just like, they're very of this era. And like, I was just like, yay, SimCity. So like, I know your experience is obviously different, but like, I don't really have anything bad or tremendously praiseworthy to say about the quality of the graphics. There's a lot of like visual feedback and things that we just obviously spent all this time talking about. But like overall, like if I had to rate just how the graphics look, I'd be like, they're good. They're of the era.
Yeah, I'd say that the graphics are like a B. The visuals, it's like they do a good job relating, like what's going on. Not amazing, but good. And they are pleasing to look at. Not amazing, but pleasing. Yeah, no, they're good. Sound?
Yeah, we should sound.
So, I don't give a shit about the sound in this game at all. Like at all. Not even a little. Like I can't. Okay, so there's nothing bad about it. I don't hate the sound in this game. I nothing it. Like it's just I don't know, man. Because I was okay. So I was playing it, and this is a very mechanics heavy game. So I was trying to get into it, trying to like see like, okay, how do I want to spend my money? How do I want to do this? And then Teddy had me create this libertarian paradise, which I portaled away from.
This libertarian nightmare scape.
Which, I mean, to be fair, from the city he was building out there, happier for not having a mayor. So whatever.
Yeah, I mean, who wants the regulation of a mayor when you can just have a Z3?
Yeah.
Have a 3-year-old make your decisions for you.
There's probably some scathing political commentary we can add, but that's not what the show's about.
Yep. Nope.
So anyways, all this is true. Yeah. But so at one point I realized I was like, oh, I don't hear the sound, So I turned the volume up on because I could like barely hear it. So I turned the volume up on my TV and I was like, oh, this has changed the experience in no way whatsoever. Like in my opinion, because I was just like, yeah, there's music. All right. It occasionally makes like a thunk sound when I put stuff down, which I think my brain was already doing for me, And so I was just kind of like,
like filler thunk.
Yeah, I mean, like when I put it down, like just the visual was very like solid. So I think my brain just kind of went like, yeah, thunk, And so, but yeah, so then when I turned on the sound, I was like, oh, it's the same.
Okay, so I have a note similar to yours with markedly less cynicism. Because here's the thing. I agree with you that the sound does not require or necessarily even deserve any sort of emotional investment. And I am highly confident that that is intentional. Mm-hmm. I am really, really confident that because as you get into later parts of the game, you're going to just let time pass. Like, you're going to just let your new things develop and try and let the equilibrium kind of shake out. And like, there's less building and less doing, and you're just allowing time to pass. And the music and the sound effects need to be fairly inoffensive. And I think what they did is they took that all the way to its logical conclusion, which is they said, do you need any of this audio? Is there any feedback you only get through audio that like we have no visual cue for of any kind? And the answer is no. And I think the right answer is no. Like, it would be really strange in this game if like there was something you only knew because of the music, like the music got dramatic, or like you couldn't see the fire, but you could hear the roar. Like, that would be super bizarre. So because there's nowhere that you need sound or music for anything. The game could be played by someone who has no auditory ability, who was born completely deaf. They could play this game and get the exact same amount of feedback from the game. I think that's an intentional design choice. And because there are going to be huge gaps of time where you're just letting years pass, you can speed time up and just let time go. I really feel like that was an intentional design decision. I'm not as like
done with sound. Moving on.
Yeah, I'm not as nihilistic about it as you are, but like I did definitely notice it, and the reason I noticed it is because I was playing while one of my daughters was napping, and I had the sound way down, and I had a headphone in, and I was listening to an audiobook, and I was like, man, if only I'd had audiobooks when I was a kid. Oh, I bet they did this on purpose. Right. So like it was sort of serendipity that I gave it the amount of attention that I did. But I really think they did it on purpose, because it would be weird if, I don't know, it would just be weird if like the only way you knew crime in the city was bad is if you could hear like police sirens all the time. Like if there was no way for you to look and see that the crime was bad.
Yeah, it was definitely a design choice. I think that you're right. It was the right one for kind of how you played it and how I learned to play it. So unless you have any more notes about sound, this actually does lead very well into something that I wanted to say about the mechanics.
Well, the last thing that I'll say about audio, and this may actually be a record for how little we have addressed audio in a game, is
because I mean that's the thing is that like I was just kind of like when I was looking at it, I was like listening to it and trying my best to come up with notes. I'm like, no, there's nothing to grab onto here, which is fine, but I was just kind of there is sound. There are sound effects.
Yeah.
None of them are needed.
The two things I have that I'll just give a mention to, other than my feelings on the intentional design choice of the ignorability of the audio, is I like that each level of city has different music. I wish that the piece for the I think it's the city or whatever's right after that, I wish that piece of music had a way longer loop, because you are stuck at that level of city sophistication for a long time. So like that piece loops way more than almost any other piece of music you hear, because the town and the smaller, the 2 or 3 like early levels, you only hear those for like a year or two, and then you quickly outgrow them. So like I like that there's unique music, but I wish they had thought like, oh, okay, this piece of music you're going to hear more than the others, so let's make this loop a little bit longer. And then the other thing is, when you go to build something and you can't build there, like if you try and do a road like through the middle of a zone or something like that, it makes like an error noise, like you can't build here. It really, really sounds like a guy going, nope. Because if you drag it out, like if you try and drag a road like across a zone, it's nope. Like everything, because I mean it's not something you do on purpose once you know where you can and can't build. But like if you're scrolling the screen and you accidentally try to build like right through the middle of a zone or something, it's just that did give me a little bit of a chuckle.
Yeah, that's reasonable. So the reason why I think that that, like you said, the sound is completely innocuous, right? When I was playing this game, so basically what I did was, I played it on easy because I wanted to.
I did not do the money cheat, though. I somehow resisted.
Oh, no, I did not as well. I wanted to actually play the game, but I did want to play it on easy.
Totally.
So I went there, like built out a huge city, and ran out of money. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll take out a loan, because I did the math on the loan. The loan's about 5% over 20 years. So I was like, yeah, that's reasonable. So I was like, okay. So I took out the loan, blew through all that money, and then got bored because like you've got no money. So I raised the taxes a little bit and then dropped my funding of a couple of different things, which we'll talk about here in a second, to the ramifications of that. But basically made it so that way, like slowly but surely, I was starting to get money back in. But at the tune of about $300 to $500 a year.
Not busting at the seams in the coffers.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just kind of like, okay, so I'd sit there and wait, and I had set to go as fast as it could, but I was just kind of like, well, I understand why it can't go faster than this, but because you don't want to like blow through like all of a sudden like 20 years and something goes wrong, and then by the time you realize it and press a button, your city's irrevocably destroyed. So I was just kind of like, maybe if they had like a fast forward button, where you could be like, okay, I want to move at like 10 times speed, but only while I'm holding this button down. But then all of a sudden I realized that no. This is the first, it's maybe not be the very first, but this is certainly one of the earliest iterations that I can think of an idle game.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, because that was the simulators are that kind of game. Well, like building simulators.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, I mean, like Sims, the Sims, and like Civilization, things like that. Those are very much so not, like they require your focused attention. In fact, for The Sims, if you leave it alone for too long, things are gonna go really bad.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, technically, the same thing happens in Civilization, but it's not one family's life you're destroying.
But yeah, so then all of a sudden, I was just like, oh. Okay, especially because like even at the end of the year with your taxes and stuff, if you just let that go, then it'll just keep going. So I started doing chores and stuff while the game just ran.
Yes, and there's actually even an auto tax setting where it doesn't bring the screen up.
Huh, neat. I did not notice that. But like that's one of the reasons why I really like the winter visual, was because it would give me an idea if I was like walking through the room and it was white. Chances are it was December, right? It was either December or January. So I would like look at it and say like, oh, okay, my revenue stream is about to come up and I've missed it for the last 3 or 4 times. Let me just double check and make sure that everything's kosher. Yep. I'd leave it alone for another 10 minutes. And it would be on and in the background. And I was just kind of like, oh, it's an idle game. It's interesting because those are very, very much more popular now, especially with cell phones,
Yeah. And I wonder if it was hard to pitch that game mechanic in the 80s, because you think like the original SimCity goes way back. I mean, like, I think it was a DOS game originally. Like, it goes way, way back. So when you had this game running on your computer could not do anything else. So if you were playing this game and you were like, okay, I'm going to let it, I'm going to go eat dinner and I'm going to just like collect some tax revenue, like, you were essentially saying, I'm not going to be here using the computer, but I am still using the computer, right? And I mean, like, you and I are both old enough to remember when you had to be like, don't pick up the phone. I'm going to be connected to the interwebs, right? Like, that was so like when you staked your claim on, like, for me, the Super Nintendo, for a lot of people going back to like their DOS, cabinet, like you were saying, like, whether or not I'm physically at this device, I'm still using this device. And if I find out you used this device while I wasn't here physically using this device, I'm going to be pissed because I was like making my tax money, right? So like that was probably a slightly harder design cell at a time before like suspending games in the background or things even running when you don't have them open.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely. I thought that was so. I thought that was like you said, a very interesting choice, especially because one of the reasons why I believe, idle games are so much more popular is because of the mobile space. Like absolutely. So. Yeah, so basically, you're on a bus or waiting for somebody to call you or something like that. You just hop onto the game real fast, press the buttons that make things go faster, and then close out. So like you said, to not have that space to do that, it is very interesting. I would definitely say that this is the first game that I can think of that is a console idle game.
Yeah. Well, and you already made the direct reference to Monopoly, and so did I. And the more I'm thinking about it, I don't think this might have been that hard of a sell, because I have very clear memories of getting into a board game and then having to like go do homework or my parents wanted me to go to bed, or I had to like leave my friend's house and go home or whatever. And we just left the board game set up, which meant no one else could play that board game until we came back and finished our round of Monopoly or our round of the Game of Life or whatever. So like the fact that this game already has so much in common with tabletop style simulators or like model sets or Monopoly style games, like maybe it wasn't that difficult to tell someone like, yeah, I'm still using the computer. I know I'm in the other room eating a meal, but yes, I am still using the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, maybe. I think that to me, I mean, definitely it may not have been that hard of a sell, but I think that to me there is a key difference between I have to stop playing this game that you can't save, basically. Like I have to stop playing this game because something else is requiring my attention to. I effectively can't play this game until I go do something else, like until time passes,
Yeah, no, you make a good point.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing is that like if you want to keep playing Monopoly, you can play it until it's murder, suicide all the way down. Because that's the only way I know that Monopoly games end.
Yeah, that's how know neither of us have ever lost a game of Monopoly.
Nope, only fought to a draw. This is how the listeners find out that we've got a 15-year game of Monopoly going. That we just. Like there have been a couple of times where I could have won, a couple of times where you could have won, but neither of us did because we didn't want to kill each other.
Yeah, one more roll of the dice, and one of us doesn't get to raise their kids. So,
yeah. No, I assume that we'd be honor bound to raise the other one's kids. Like
well, yeah, but one of us still isn't there. I'm not saying they're going to become latchkey children.
You're not gonna. Well, naturally, I assume that they would die of sadness.
That is one of the greatest Simpsons lines of all time.
Dredrick Tatum. I love that one. I love the this is what I think about the Fourth Estate. What are the first three? Nobility, clergy, and communists. Learn your French history. Anyways, what were we talking about before then? Oh yeah, but there's a key difference between being able to play the game and basically like coming up to a point where you're just kind of like, there is no more game to play until I leave and go do something else for 20 minutes or so, and then come back and no, there's game to play. But I do think that it does. One of the things that does inherently bake in is so we've kind of talked briefly a couple of times about humane design. So the idea being is that like if you make a game to where it punishes the player for having to leave, or even psychologically to the point where it puts you into such a tight Skinner box to where you don't feel that you can leave, even though you can, that's inhumane game design. So the nice thing about a game like this that is an idle game is that it is inherently or is closer to being humane because literally you go in, you play for like 5 minutes and then you have to leave, you can literally only play that game for so long before you can sit there and stare at it, but you might as well leave and go do other things.
Well, and at that point, you're arguably not playing, right?
Right. Yeah. So, like you said, I think that this would be a great game, to queue up like while you're doing homework or like for me, like chores, it's just, queue it up, have it kind of do its thing and occasionally be like, yep, going to do A, B, C. All right. Watch the numbers go up. Great. And then move on. But so, yeah, it was very, very interesting. What did you think of the what did you think of the cognitive load? So, like, especially towards the beginning, like, how do you think that they load leveled the player?
So that's an interesting way to address the question I think you're asking, which is, I'm gonna kind of attack this from like an expectations and feedback, right? Mm-hmm. So my entire career has been in academia in one sense or another. So I am around and having to constantly think about the idea of the feedback loop because that is the only place learning can happen. If you do a thing and you get no feedback about what happened, you cannot learn anything, right? And if you get a bunch of feedback that is useless to you, it is almost the same as no feedback, right? Like you don't know what to make changes to.
If your instructor is giving you feedback in Chinese and you don't speak Chinese, then it's not very good feedback.
Yeah, essentially the one thing you have learned is this instructor only speaks Chinese. Right? So it's like, okay, check. I know if one of the questions on the test is what language did your instructor speak to you in, then you're good.
So side story. I have a like obviously once you become a parent, like kids abound, right? And a friend of mine, she her kid we were at like this huge pool party, right? And I made like those Fanoodle swords, right?
Can you use those for anything else?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So I made a Fanoodle great sword, which was for me, and then the Fanoodle smaller swords were for the Chillins, right? So obviously, immediately the Chillins wanted the great sword, and I was more than willing to share, but it wasn't made for them, so it was unwieldy at best. And so like I was like swimming in the pool, and the kid was like, hey, give me the big sword. I'm like, you don't want this, and he was like, no, I do. And I was like, okay. So I handed it to him, and I took his 2 smaller swords, and he swung the big sword at me, and I swatted it out of the way and tapped him, and that goes on for about 4 or 5 iterations, and he's like treading water as best as he can. I mean, he's a champ, And then I said, like, what have you learned? And he said that I can't breathe underwater. I said, did you not already know that?
Is this your first time around water?
And he was like, no, I knew that. And I'm like, so you haven't learned anything so far then, have you? Do you think there's something you could be learning? And he was just kind of like, what? And I was like, maybe not to use a weapon that you can't wield properly. But I think that speaks to your point, which is to say that, if you're getting no feedback, right, or you're drawing the wrong feedback and somebody's not giving you feedback to correct that, then it's not helpful. You don't make any progress.
And this is a thing that a human teacher or coach can refine in real time if they are good at their profession. And this is a thing that a game is more able to do now with better processing power, but even in the modern age, it's still really easy to create a game that provides garbage feedback. And I'm actually going to tangent off of your tangent just because it's so loosely related and it's a funny story. So
go on.
Just literally today, I was outside with my kids and a bunch of the neighbor children, and they have these little squirter things. It's basically a fun noodle. Which, by the way, that pronunciation drives me insane. It's fun noodle. So it's basically a fun noodle with a small plunger in it. And so you can suck water into it and then you can squirt water out, right? But it's soft.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen those fun noodles.
Yeah, them. Are these them? So
are these they?
So it, soft, squishy, hard to break, hard to hurt somebody with. But the kids were they're all fairly young kids. And one by one, each one of them almost in turn shot one of the other kids. That kid then complained, and one of the adults had to be like, if I'm going to use made up names here, if Jimmy doesn't want to get shot by the water, Mary, don't shoot him. Okay. And so we had to go, all of the adults had to do this for each of the kids until finally I realized in the back of my mind that I had now checked off every child, and every child had to be given this same message. And I just decided this is not a teachable moment. I am going to come down from the mount with a commandment from God. And I just said, you know what? Every single one of you has now complained that you do not like being shot. So shooting games are now illegal. No one wants to be shot. You only want to shoot each other, but none of you are willing to be the recipient of shooting. So no more shooting. And
no more.
And they're all looking at me but we want to shoot each other. And I'm just I'm having this feedback moment where I'm I don't know how to convey to children this age, the ethical ramifications of being willing to do something to someone else when you're not willing to have it be done to yourself. How do I communicate the golden rule to 4-year-olds?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh God, it was mind-numbing. But yeah, I mean that's the feedback loop, right? Because I didn't have a way to provide good feedback, the system broke.
Yep.
I tied it together. I did it.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, with a nice little bow. No, actually, what I was more so driving at, because we can definitely talk about the feedback loop, but is the basically, okay, so it hits you with a tremendous amount of information right off the bat.
And zero direction.
Exactly. So basically, the cognitive load right off the top is super high. Just because basically it's just here's the entirety of the game. Play it, with no idea. So I was I literally, and I am not one, as you can probably attest to from our friendship, to suffer from analysis paralysis. Nope. I tend to err on the other side of that equation.
I think Would you say the opposite of analysis paralysis is like shooting from the hip?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to find something that like has good rhyme schema, but yeah, I do tend to more instead of evaluating the 10 possible things to go wrong, I evaluate the first two and say like, yeah, it's probably good, and then just go from there. Anyways, but I myself was like sitting there for about a couple of minutes, just kind of like, I have no idea where to even start building my civilization based on my play style, based on the resources I have at my disposal. I mean, like, do I want to build? Because I started to just build in the center, and Megan, who had played the game before, said, "Oh, well, you should build near the coast so you can build a seaport." And I was like, okay, why though? Like, why?
Why would I care about such a trivial thing?
Yeah, and she was just kind of like, well, having seaport's good. I'm like, well, what does it do for me? And she was like, I don't really know, or like, I don't remember. But I couldn't divine that from any of the information, And so I was kind of like, I guess I'll just do this. And I mean, there is something to be said for repetition in games, and by getting better through repetition. But, I thought that basically giving you all of your resources up front to make a whole bunch of long-term decisions that are absolutely going to impact gameplay with no information whatsoever was an odd way to go about it, as opposed to having your resources like firmly grow towards the beginning. Like, so for example, if, in the beginning you start off, let's say like, you're like, I want to start off with 10,000 gold, right? Because it's gold, right? So
it's, I believe it's actually Zenny.
Oh, I thought, or maybe Gald. Were there some games that used Gald?
Gil was popular in a bunch of the Final Fantasies too.
Yeah. Yep. Anyways, but anyway, so to say like, you have an investor, who like wants to, will invest in you, but they invest in like chunks, so you get the first $1,000 to spend, which really limits, or like $500, which limits the types of buildings that you can build. Mm-hmm. It's just like, so like, okay, so you need to start off with these 3 buildings and all this sort of stuff. And then your investor, who could be that weird dude,
Dr. Wright.
Your investor, like, and he could say, like, he could be like, hey, this is what I want to see, for the first whatever, and then like have it build up like that to the point where, you get your first few monies and installments. And then it's like, and now here's your remaining $8,000, go nuts, But there's basically no tutorial, and I think in a game like this, unless you're really focusing in on repetition as like basically practice gameplay, not planned and not improvised, then you gotta have some kind of a tutorial with a game that's complicated.
So I'm going to actually take the devil's advocate position here, because I kind of agree with it, as well as it'd just be super boring if I was like, "Yup," and then the music started playing. So. There is a little bit of feedback in that if the first thing you did when you open the game is talk to Dr. Wright, or if you do nothing and then you talk to Dr. Wright, or if you do crazy things, he will actually weigh in and be like, maybe you should build a police station. Maybe you should build some commercial zones since all you have are factories without power. Like he will kind of give you a tiny bit of nudging. I think they could have made the feedback he gives you better, but I disagree with there should be a tutorial, because I think they intentionally left that out. I think they very, very much want you to dive in, try something, collect feedback about how that worked, and then try something new, and then collect feedback about how that worked, and just like, that is the incentive to keep playing the game, is to collect more data and to build better and better cities, because the game does not give you a lot of information about direction, or if the things you're doing are having the effect you hope they are. Like, because everything is multivariable, right? Like, when you build residential zones, it's not just whether you need residential zones, it's their proximity to industrial zones and commercial zones, and how much crime do they have, and are they on fire, and are there roads, and do they have power? Like, there's a ton of variables that can go into whether a zone is successful or not. And you're not even really told that the object is to build a large city, because it's not. Like, there isn't an object to the game other than to build a city. So you could build a city that's like one residential zone, one commercial zone, one industrial zone, one police station, and a power plant, and then just let it run for 1,000 years. And the game would just be like, okay, that's fine. Right. So I think a tutorial, some semblance of a tutorial, particularly a skippable or like turn offable tutorial, would be an expectation in a modern SimCity. I don't actually think the theme of SimCity is one of a tutorial, because the second Dr. Wright says, maybe you should try like a residential, commercial, and then put the industrial a little bit further away, the player is going to say, oh, that's the ideal block layout, and that's all I'm ever going to do forever. And then they're going to build a grid of that takes up the entire map of that layout in that ratio. And maybe it's good, maybe it's even the best, but like that would be really boring if you just took this one like footprint. And so I think leaving the tutorial out is kind of taking a stance as game designers and saying, if you are not the kind of person who is willing to build an entire city just to find out this one piece of information and then burn it all down and start over, you're probably not going to like this game.
And that very well may be true. And what I'm thinking of is not like, you know, the classic tutorial of like, you know, do thing A, then do thing B, then do thing C. I mean, like, for example, Portal is 90% tutorial, right?
I'm sorry. All I can think is, Mega Man, you should build a commercial zone.
Yeah, I already know this. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is, you know, like Portal is 90% tutorial, you know, and it doesn't feel like that, you know. I just think that they could have done. And I don't think that it should be a game where it's like your hand is compulsively held and where like every single emergent mechanic is explained to you, especially in the beginning. But that being said, I do think that they could have gated it a little bit better before you know, like take your $10,000, blow it on an airport, a football stadium, and a
power plant.
And, you know,
you're like, why does no one live here?
Yeah, like what they can live inside of the football stadium and they can live in the airport, right? Like that's, you know, like just something a little bit to kind of like gate you and help you get started in this is how to even come close to building a city direction. Just because, again, it's not, to me, I'm entirely fine with, you know, like playing for an hour to figure out like, oh, this was suboptimal and then trying again. But I'm afraid that there would be a lot of players who would just be hit with the UI and then walk away, you know?
Yeah. And I am in reality, even though I believe they made a firm design decision about how you collect feedback is exclusively through close observation of the results of your actions and not really through the game overtly telling you like that was a good idea, this was a bad idea, right? I am aware of how big that gray area is, and there's a lot more they could have done to let you know what the hell was going on and like what buttons did without going all the way to it being a hand-holding baby game for babies, right? So they could have done more without completely giving up on their vision of like people will just know what to do.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that I don't think that, like, if on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 1 being no tutorial whatsoever, right, and a 10 being, you know, like literally Mega Man, hey Mega Man, like, you know, then this game is like around like a 2, you know, and I'm saying like, yeah, maybe bump it up to like a 3, maybe a 4, you know, just get some clever stuff, like, cause even Darkest Dungeon, which is renowned for not holding your hand, it has a tutorial. Yes. You know, the tutorial is just you getting to the town, and so you're only given 2 heroes as opposed to your usual 4. You know, like it has it as opposed to it being roguelike, you know, it has very scripted encounters where it's like encounter A, encounter B, encounter C, so you're very like unlikely to die. And so like it's like in this encounter we're going to show you kind of how this mechanic works, because this bad guy is going to use this ability on you, it's going to do this thing. Mm-hmm. And so then you've seen it, you know, and so then by the time you get to the town you have some idea, and there's a tremendous amount of depth to the mechanics they don't tell you ever. You know, you could play the entire game and not notice it, you know. But they still give you like some of the basics at the beginning, and I think because I remember seeing a presentation recently where, you know, it's kind of like the game, which I have never played, but Dwarf Fortress.
I've also never played Dwarf Fortress, but it's one of those cultural touchstones that other people like in my circle of nerds have talked about it enough that I'm like, I feel like I know,
passing, yeah.
like I would recognize a restaurant that's sold that kind of food, even though I could not begin to describe to you what it tastes like. I would, if I was walking down the street, I could be like, oh, that's a Dwarf Fortress. And they're like, oh, what's Dwarf Fortress like? No idea.
No idea. But that's that. But yeah, I mean, my understanding from Dwarf Fortress is that there is an amazing amount of depth and intricacy to that game that like 90% of the people who even pick it up don't get to, because the UI is complicated and there's absolutely no attempt to teach the player, like through anything but their own trial and error, so therefore, like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I do thing A, thing B, thing C. It's like, actually there's a whole lot more to the game, but you've got to really invest, so
and this is a thing that the more we talk about it, the more I'm convincing myself this was an intentional design choice to just throw you in, and for throwing you in to be the primary mode of gameplay, because at least SimCity on the Super Nintendo, I played SimCity 2000 a lot, but I don't remember if that game had this other mode, which is like, here is an existing pre-built city that has a specific set of problems, and you come in and fix those problems, right? So here's a city that is like notoriously overdeveloped and doesn't have anywhere near enough power, but the minute you add power, people are going to want to move in, and it's going to cause all these things to fly out of balance. Like, how would you fix San Francisco? How would you fix Boston? How would you fix, Orlando, Florida? Like, just all these, there's like, I don't know, like 4 to 8 like pre-built cities, and those are for the like, I don't know what to, like, how do I start? Like, the analysis paralysis, like, I understand how to play the game. I know what buttons to push to make things happen, but like, how do I lay out a city? How do I make decisions? What are my goals? And so there's an entire like B game mode that's like, oh, here's a broken city you can kind of fix. And like, that'll give you an objective to focus on. But really what they want is for you to say, here's a field, over there's a river, and way off on the edge, there's a lake. Now, build whatever the hell you want. Like, build a sprawling metropolis, build a mecca to capitalism, build like an industrial nightmare world where everything is just smog and hate. Like, do whatever you want, because there's no win condition and there's no failure condition. Like, if you build a city and then you kill everyone either through inaction or turning disasters on or whatever, like, you don't lose. You cannot lose SimCity. I think even if you were backed into an impossible corner where you have no city, no population, and $0, I don't think that the game stops. I think time would just pass and it would be like, what happens after humanity dies? Like, so the fact that it's that open-ended is, I don't even know what to call it. Like, I guess a practice-based game. Like, you can only learn through trial and error, and also there's no set objective.
Yeah. And I mean, that's fine. I just, to me, that I think, and don't get me wrong, like, I enjoyed this game. But I think that the issue is you're going to lose a lot of people just who won't, like who I think could enjoy the game if they just weren't immediately hammered with this tremendous amount of information, you're
probably losing some people who would enjoy the mechanic if the price of entry was a little bit lower.
Exactly. Is it, because that's the thing, is that I think that it's all very interesting, fascinating, and manageable. It's just the game asks you to learn a lot in the first like 10 minutes, and then to be fair, it's kind of like, but okay, well, another good corollary would be like Minecraft, right? Minecraft also has no lose condition, right? You can sit there and die forever, and and there's also no win condition, right? But even and there's an amazing amount of mechanical depth, right? But Minecraft does scaffold its teaching, because you start off and all you can do is mine, trees and dirt, basically, with your hands, mm-hmm. And then, so first thing you learn how to do is like build your basic tools. Then you can build, this this chest. But even then, you won't have the resources to build everything in there, so it's all grayed out. It's like you can build these 4 things, and then slowly over time you're introduced to it. If they basically hit you with all of that like right at the beginning, probably a lot of people would be like, this is way too complicated. So that's just kind of like my 2 cents. Is that I think that you're right. I think that they were just kind of like, hey, we don't want to guide the player, we want this to be a complete sandbox experience. But I think that it's a lot to put on a player just within the first 10 minutes. So
well, and not having clear memories of learning to play SimCity, I'm on the others. Like I'm like I got into a place I shouldn't be, right? Like I'm a dog who caught a car I never expected to catch. Because when I load up SimCity, I sit down, I got my purple and gray controller, and I'm like, okay, Super Nintendo time. I'm gonna play one of the first Super Nintendo games I ever played. Okay, I know there's a residential zone, and I'm going to do mass transit to keep pollution down, and I'm going to use nuclear power plant because it keeps pollution down. You got to have this many police stations, otherwise people get murdered all over the place. And like, I know how to get started. So like going from 0 to 1, I know what to do. My problem is, and I encountered this in Flabinaba, is when I got to a population of about...
Which one?
The one that I currently have a house in, not the ones I portaled out of, where I assume they're now overrun with Cronenberg monsters.
Flabinaba C-137.
That's right. So when, the C-137 is the Cronenberg universe, because that's the one they flee.
That's assuming that was Rick's original universe.
Well, we know it's Morty's original universe.
Yeah, and he calls himself Morty C-137, but I don't think anybody's doing traces on Morty's.
That's true.
And it actually would not.
And if that's just the number Rick tells him, like, what's he going to check his math?
Yeah. You're just the kid who wanted to drug Morty. Well, and also too is it would not surprise me if the way that Rick's track Morty's is whatever their Rick's number is, they are assigned that number, because they treat Morty's like they're interchangeable. He even gets a raffle ticket for one free Morty. Yes. So your Morty is assigned your number. It's, oh my God, it's like of Fred or of Glenn.
Oh my God. Yes. Okay. So Flabinaba C-137, because unfortunately in this analogy, I am the monster Rick Sanchez. Yes. But yeah, so in Flabinaba C-137, I got to a population of right around 160,000, which is how I know that level of city development lasts way too long, because that's the music I got stuck listening to. And my population would go up to like 165, 168, like close to 170. And then for nothing changed. I have not built anything. I have not destroyed anything. My population would just dip back down, sometimes way down to like 150. And then it would like kind of plateau again. And then it would like climb back up to about 160, and it would plateau again. And then it would like, it just fluctuated. I wish I'd like written the numbers down, because I almost guarantee you it was like this bizarre sine curve, like around 160. And I tried. So like, I realized that was happening because I'd let a bunch of years go by so I could accrue some money. I realized that was happening. And then I was like, okay, what do I do differently? And I realized I had this laundry list of things I was positive would be harmful. And then I had this other laundry list of things that I was confident would be harmful. And then I had this laundry list of things that I was like, these might at least just be neutral. And that was when I realized, I was like, okay, I don't know if this is bad game design or if I am not the right audience for this, for being able to play this for an incredibly extended period of time. But I was like, I am now at a place where I just want to stop, because I have no idea how to proceed other than try a bunch of things that are almost definitely bad and see if one of them is maybe good. Yeah. Like that's not a position as a player where I'm like, okay, time to start checking things off my bad list. Like, and I'm not saying that that's even bad game design, but like, we're talking about like the gate that keeps people from starting. Like, this is the gate that kept me from proceeding, when I was like, all I can think to do is start trying random nonsense and taking notes about the results. And that was just not enticing to me.
Yeah. Which is interesting. But, because I think that, I think that this game was a good first attempt at like an idle game, but there's some stuff that does this antithetical to that, and some stuff that does like really, really well. So it's kind of double-edged. But we cannot finish this podcast without talking about the disasters.
No, we cannot.
No. So, run me through your apocalypse, or like how you decided to institute. Well, because so obviously we had to test the disasters. We're not monsters. We had to test them for the podcast.
We had to test
right?
the monsters.
Exactly. So how did you go about your play test?
So so one of the early Flabinabas, this is where it's a really good thing that I portaled out of there, because I was trying to build something and like the layout wasn't working quite the way I wanted. It was very early in this Flabinaba, and I was just like, click, 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 click. Like I just turned them all on and then walked away to get my tea.
Yep.
And then, so I didn't even revel in the carnage. Like, and I just came back and like everything was a hot mess, and Dr. Wright was like losing his mind. And I was like, portal, jump in, never saw that town again. Like,
yep.
So that was like an early, like what that told me, the small bit of feedback that I got from that is that one, the disasters take slightly longer to kick off than I remembered, which is probably so you have a chance to toggle them back off.
Nice,
if there's
that's
like
fair.
a regret moment, like there is actually, I don't know, like a solid 30 plus seconds before a disaster actually starts.
Yeah.
And so I got that piece of feedback. And then the other piece of feedback I got is that some of the disasters are, they are designed for a highly developed city. They're not expecting you to use disasters super early on, because the fire, like, oh my God, there's a fire, was in a forest on the other side of a river, which was on an island. And so
Nice.
and so I just did nothing about it. I was like, no one's over there, and this fire cannot possibly cross to my city. Like, this isn't a disaster. This is just a thing that happened.
Yeah. This is like nature taking its course. Now, actually, so I kind of had a similar experience of, to yours, but mine was dealing with the latency of the toggle, right?
Oh,
So
were you angry the world didn't end like more promptly?
kind of. So I turned the thing on, and nothing happened. I was like, odd. I turned it off. Turned it back on, off, on, off, on. To hell with it. All of them on. And then, so basically, like, to me, it's like just like button, like keyboard mash, and then they all went off.
The kid in the elevator who just like all the floors.
Yeah. And yeah, I was not disappointed. So again, like you said, that it is definitely for when you've taken up a lot of the map, because the fire happened in a warehouse. That makes sense. So I just bulldozed the warehouse and the poor small residential areas that were around it. Took care of that, no problem. Earthquake, yeah, no, that did some damage. Tornado on the other end of the map, and I was like, that may get to me eventually. I'm not really worried about it right now. And what was it? There's another one, but
Bowser.
Yeah, that was the last one that happened. Right? It was like Bowser's coming. I'm like, you mean Godzilla? You piece of. It's fine. So, anyways, yeah. No, so Bowser like pops out of the water and he's like, I'm gonna get you. And I'm like, yeah, eventually. Like, I'm not worried about it, dude, because you are 50 miles away. Like Mario's gonna show up way before you get here.
Yeah, the disasters, in light of the way we were talking about the UI, the disasters feel like a thing that maybe you shouldn't even know you can do until you've like populated a certain portion of the map, because the disasters are, I mean, if you want to be childish about it, it's like, oh, they're there because it's funny to like make tornadoes, har har har. The real reason the disasters are there from like a gameplay standpoint has got to be, I have this immaculate, perfect city, And now I would like to give myself a challenge. So I'm going to let some random nonsense happen to damage my city so then I can see how I would recover from it. In fact, I think one of the scenarios is, God, it's like the Great Fire of London or something. It's like you load up the map and literally the map is on fire. Like half of your city from the minute you load that scenario is on fire. So like, how do you deal with that? And then more importantly, how do you build after? Do you demolish those zones entirely? Do you try and let them thrive with what's remaining? Like, do you let them thrive for a while until like the nearby commercial zone gets built up, then smash that residential zone and put a new one? Like, right. It's like, so there's definitely a gameplay mechanic to it, but the fact that you can do it from the very beginning when it has no impact of any kind is a little confusing to the player. Like, oh, there's these buttons. Oh, there's this massive delay. Did anything even happen? Oh, that tree over there is on fire. I guess that's a thing I'll maybe care about later, right? Like it's kind of confusing. But if they waited and like this little button lit up after your population of the map, like you would, built up like 60+% of the map, and then the disasters button becomes clickable, you'd be like, ooh,
what does that do? I'm gonna click them all. But yeah, so that was my disaster experience. So unless you have anything else, how'd it hold up?
It held up about the way I expected, which is like I'm firmly in the nostalgia monocle camp. Like, if you wanted to play SimCity, play a much newer SimCity, or play like one of the spin-offs of SimCity that is trying to fix things that are inherent to the SimCity franchise that some players think are broken. So I think if you were going to play SimCity on the Super Nintendo, or so help you God, if you go back to like the DOS version, like you would need pretty firm nostalgia goggles, or at least that quality nostalgia monocle with a gold chain, because there's just bizarre limitations. There's a lot of assumptions made in how much time you are willing to sink into it. And if that's your thing, you're gonna love it. But if you are confused by the UI, if you don't know how to start, if you suffer from analysis paralysis, there are no tools to help you over those hurdles. None at all. Like, they basically just turn you away at the door, which may be their way of saying like, dude, this is not for you. Like,
this is not the club for you, man.
Save yourself the minutes or hours or days of frustration and just don't even come in here. But because I have fond memories of playing this game, I would love to say like, oh no, person who's never played SimCity, you'd love SimCity. Just maybe don't play it for Super Nintendo, because you wouldn't love that one.
Yeah, no, I'm also firmly in nostalgia monocle. This game does some things very, very well, and it does some very interesting things. And like I said, I think for a first pass at an idle game, I think it's really interesting and fairly well done for a first pass. I think that this game is a really, really good one to study for some of the things, because it's very deliberate and clear with what it does. Like once you put in that time and you like understand, like, okay, you've gotten past the UI and all this sort of stuff. Like, if you're looking for a class on practice gameplay and on how to build a old school idle game, then yeah, this is a good lesson. But I would not recommend it to somebody who did not play it as a kid and wants to revisit it. It does hold up if you played it before, but if you haven't played it till now, no, like you said, there's a bunch of other games out there that do this way better.
Yeah. So there's the way people remember SimCity, which is like, oh, Bowser like marched across and it like blew everything up, and like he does that. But then when you see it in person and you're like, oh, he spawned on the other side of the map and then disappeared before he actually got to my city. It's like that's a good Reader's Digest summary of what it's like to play this game if you'd never played it before. Like, you click a button, something amazing is about to happen, and then doesn't.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day.